Hi, and welcome to another episode of Creepy and Geeky. Today, I am rejoined with my kids.
Hello.
They're back. So
That
today
hello
we're gonna
was not planned. I just want to say.
stop ruining the illusion, Katrina.
Sorry.
Anyway,
Saying it wasn't planned was planned, though.
Not true.
all right. So anyway, they have finally had a little bit of time. We watched a couple of movies, and we finally have a little bit of time to record an episode together. So we are going to delve deep into Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness today. But first, it's been a while since they've been on the show, so we're going to talk about some of the things we've been getting up into pop culture-wise, creepy and or geeky. So, Harrison, why don't you start first?
So the thing that I've been doing recently is I have been watching the original trilogy of Star Wars with
Excellent,
my
excellent.
son. My son is about to be a year old now, and so I'm not expecting him to get much of the plot details, but I'm expecting him to just kind of watch it and like see the explosions, the blaster bolts, the lightsabers, and the characters, and just kind of like start him early, like get him early and on the ground floor for that kind of stuff, so that way it's something he'll grow up with. And for what it's worth, of the things that we have put in front of him that capture his attention, as long as there is action on screen, he is interested.
Which, I mean, to be fair,
if,
most of Star Wars is pretty action.
It is.
It stays pretty busy.
Like when Luke was training with Yoda, he was all over the place. He was climbing on the couch and just not paying attention.
That's kind of not my favorite part of Empire also. I love Empire, but when Luke is with Yoda,
He had to train somehow,
yeah, it's just boring.
unlike other characters.
I skipped that part and the whole movie too. So just kidding.
Mic drop.
Katrina's a lesser fan of the Star Wars universe.
But we are
okay.
currently in the middle of Return of the Jedi. So that one will be that'll conclude our original trilogy, and then we'll start diving into the prequels. And I actually, from a parental perspective, watching Star Wars kind of has a different. I have a different perspective watching Star Wars, especially just from the plot, but also from like the direction and the way that the movies are presented. And I definitely notice a lot of things more, like how Return of the Jedi is a lot more kid oriented than a lot of the other original trilogy movies, especially in comparison to Empire Strikes Back.
Oh yeah, which is a large part of why people had a huge backlash against Return of the Jedi for so long, because everybody's like, it's a toy commercial. He was selling plush Ewoks to everybody, and instead of doing what his original plan was to have the Wookiees, and instead he was like, no, let's make them cuddly and small so then we can sell toys. Because he'd been selling toys.
I mean, to be fair, it meant that we got a nice, cool battle with the Wookiees on Kashyyyk and Revenge of the Sith, though.
No, it's fine.
when we
I mean,
actually
he
had
kind of
like
redeemed
the
it later.
CGI and like the actual kind of effects to really kind of give it a lot of justice. Because honestly, if I just saw a bunch of Wookiees running around with like spears
I
and
don't
stuff
know,
like
it'd be
that,
kind of-
it'd be
kinda cool.
interesting. But it wouldn't necessarily have had the same impact that it does in Revenge of the Sith, where like we're seeing them like going in on the dragonfly copters and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, just that felt pretty cool. That and did the Wookiees a little bit more justice than I think than just a forest planet just to resolve the plot of a shield generator.
All right. Well, we're getting a little far afield here.
Anyway,
the point was that you were showing my grandson Star Wars for the first time.
Your grandson, not my son. Your
No,
grandson.
you had already established he was your son.
but,
It's obvious he's my grandson as well.
But hopefully,
Well, he's not my nephew. I'm just
hopefully, hopefully that'll start a lifelong interest in Star Wars. That's my goal.
Hopefully, but just like showing it to you, my hope was that you would be
it's
interested in
Star Wars. Of course, he's gonna love it. I mean, it's
Well,
just
I
something
mean-
that like every kid basically gets into.
it. You
Don't
you
talk,
hope
Katrina.
you hope that your kids will get into the things that you're
Mm-hmm.
into, but look at you guys. It's taking you till your 20s to even really get to really consider getting into like reading comic books,
Yeah,
which has always been my biggest
Because
passion.
it's reading.
True, I get that it's just reading. It's not as
We,
interesting.
we didn't grow up in the 80s where we
Yeah.
had limited television and limited movies. Like we live in an era where we've got a screen constantly in front of
So,
us,
yes.
and so we have
So
enough to
it'll be
distract
it'll be
ourselves.
interesting to see how he
Speaking
responds
of,
to the Star Wars stuff that you're showing him. So
I am going to be running an online campaign as my second thing to discuss because we got to move this thing along.
What?
Gonna be running an online campaign for a couple friends set in the Dark Sun setting of D&D. So a lot of savagery, slave pits and arenas, very Conan the Barbarian, with sorcerer kings and all of that kind of vibes of crossing the desert and barely able to survive by the limited amount of supplies you have in between settlements. And so just very interesting setting. Kind of flips a lot of things on its head. So like all the hobbits are cannibals. The elves are desert raiders that run very fast across the dunes. Just other fun things like that. Everyone's got psychic powers because let's just make this dune if it's a desert.
Oh, speaking of, and I didn't get to tell you this. This will be an interesting thing to add to the podcast. But Christopher Walken was just added to the cast of Dune 2 as the Emperor.
Interesting. That's an interesting choice to be the
Yeah.
emperor.
So anyway,
He doesn't have too much. I mean, he's important in the book, but
Yeah.
he doesn't have too many lines of dialogue. He's just
maybe
kind
they'll
of
pump it up.
he kind of sits in a chair for the most of the book, and he's just kind of like, oh no, they're invading, and so well, hopefully that'll be good. Honestly, just regarding Dune Part 1, pretty good. Good adaptation. But yeah, Dark Sun, really excited for that. That's been a really interesting thing to do because I've never really expounded on playing D&D in a completely different setting to the like evil dark forest with the giant spiders in it and that kind of like tombs with skeletons and that kind of general fantasy trope. So it's been fun to kind of experiment with that a lot and kind of think of new challenges and stuff like that. So
Cool. Yeah, this is definitely not the arena that I've ever been in. I don't generally play role-playing games, so this is one of those things that you picked up on your own that was not influenced by me.
high school,
Yes, you had high school friends who
we thought we were going to just be total nerds and play some D&D and it would be a whole joke and we would move on with our lives and be cool.
And unfortunately, you did
That
not.
that didn't happen. I devolved
doubled
further
down on the nerdery.
into geeky nerdy.
They
like,
got cool. He stayed a nerd.
yeah, actually,
Yeah. All
I
right.
think one of them's a Marine now.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. All right. So Katrina, what have you been up to?
Well, I stopped listening to Morbid for a little bit there
Right.
because I got burnt out on all of the people getting raped and murdered and put in the back of trucks and then being found in the forest months later.
I can't see
sort of
why you
thing.
would get burnt out on all that.
Yeah.
I was
So,
gonna say that'll do it.
Yeah.
so it's just a lot of information to take in at once.
Oh yeah.
And so I had to take a break for a couple months, but now I'm back in it and I'm listening to the episodes about the Boston Strangler, and that's really interesting because there might not be one Boston Strangler. So it's kind of I really don't think there's one Boston Strangler.
You think there might be more, is what you're saying?
Yeah, because
Okay.
because the killings went from elderly white women to a black woman in her 20s, and they're sexual like murders. So you don't just create that kind of shift just like willy-nilly.
Right. It's usually
Like
there's
for
usually a pattern.
sexual murders, if you've seen like Criminal Minds or whatever, like you know that they have a type.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
weird.
unusual for.
The Criminal
Yeah.
Minds, the most accurate source
Well,
for
I'm just-
criminal
what-
identification data.
Yes, but listening to
But
actual
it's
crime
based on
podcasts, you find out that
actual.
it's actually the
It's
same
based
stuff,
on
yes.
profiling and
Yeah.
that stuff,
Yes.
and that's accurate for the most
Smart ass.
part. It's profiling is a
Let's
general.
not say that.
Profiling
Let's
is a general profile of the criminal, and
She's talking
sometimes
about-
they deviate.
She's talking about
So-
I'm
psychological
understanding that
profiling.
it's psychological profiling.
yeah,
So,
Not
anyway,
physical
not
profiling.
racial.
yeah,
profiling.
no.
Yeah.
The fuck are you talking about? Jesus.
I'm just saying we gotta specify. Like,
Okay. Anyway, so you've
Okay,
been
so-
re-enjoying Morbid again.
Yes, I've been
Okay.
re-listening to Morbid on my drives to and from work. That's been interesting. And then I have gotten back into my K-pop and K-drama phase
Right.
because I realized that those interests made me really, really happy, and so I stopped being into it because I was on Stan Twitter and that burnt me out. And so, but now I'm back in it, not on Stan Twitter, but I'm
Right.
rewatching K-dramas. I'm trying to keep up with new releases and things like that. But it's kind of hard. The most recent K-drama I've been watching was Crash Landing on You, and it's about this South Korean woman who ends up getting lost in a tornado while paragliding and lands in North Korea and gets stuck there for a while, and then she falls in love with a North Korean man, and the North Korean man falls in love with the South Korean woman, and it's kind of cute and kind of crazy. So
Not bad. Sounds like it.
it's a really good one.
Cool.
And then after that, I've been trying to watch the MCU films from start to finish, and also trying to watch the TV shows too.
Well, I think you've seen all the MCU movies at least once before.
Now I have,
Yeah.
cause
Were you missing some before that you hadn't seen?
yeah,
Maybe some of the early ones?
Yeah, I hadn't watched like some of the Thor movies, some of the Iron Man movies,
Oh,
and I
okay.
hadn't watched the Incredible Hulk.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
I know that's not technically MCU, but it's
That one is MCU. It's just not. It wasn't in the same
It's just
studio
different
at the time
yeah.
because Universal owns the rights to
Okay.
the Hulk.
Yeah,
Which
so
is why
I've
the
been
Hulk
doing that.
can't. Which is why they've never done another Hulk movie, is because Universal owns the rights, so he
Mm.
can appear in MCU movies. He just can't have his own movie.
Mm.
So,
But yeah, so and then I've
and as of last night, you were caught up to Captain America: Winter Soldier.
yes,
Right.
so I'm watching Guardians of the Galaxy now.
Okay.
And I also was gonna start WandaVision, and I had started Moon Knight as well. So that's
All right.
yeah, very interesting. So that's what I've been up to. I mean, not too much.
Well, you've been doing finals at school and working full time, so
yeah.
you've had a lot going on. And Harrison's been working full time and has a baby and a wife
I don't
to take
think
care of.
anyone
So
has ever responded that positively to finals before, so I will just clarify that I passed all of my finals and had a AB average. For
no,
my
you were
classes.
you did
So-
awesome this semester. You had a rough couple of semesters before, and this semester you were working full time and doing 5 classes at school. And I was amazed that you were getting through it and you weren't having any problems. And you got 4 A's and a B. So
Yep.
that's awesome. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
So that is very cool.
but
Can't
as-
get my scholarship
but
back
as
yet, but hopefully soon.
As for the MCU, that would segue
Well,
into our main topic.
Dad still has.
Actually, I still need to talk about
Yeah.
my stuff that I'm doing. But
We're
Katrina's
just gonna throw away this really good segue that I
Yes.
just did.
yes, because you ruined it because you did it
Yeah,
way
because you
too
didn't
early.
take
'Cause
Dad's
you were just-
feelings into consideration.
yeah. I was going to bounce off of
I
Katrina
mean,
saying
we're
that
the
she
ones
was
who
watching.
haven't been here in a while. I'm sure people only care about our opinions, right?
Sure, that's what's.
They've already
happening
heard
right
your opinions for several episodes.
now. Anyway, so Katrina said she was watching Moon Knight. Katrina and Harrison both have started Moon Knight but haven't finished it yet. I actually have finished it. It's okay. It's not my favorite MCU thing. Moon Knight's always been one of those characters that he's always been on the periphery for me. I've always been a big Marvel comic book reader, and I've read a few of his series here and there, and they're okay. But every writer basically does their own thing with the character and kind of changes it and twists it to fit whatever they want to say about the character, which is fine. Sometimes you get some really great stuff. I was a big fan of the Warren Ellis run. Brian Michael Bendis had an interesting run on it. So there's been a few really good runs, but this series, like, I don't want to say it was bad because it really wasn't bad. It was just okay. I think that there were some missed opportunities, and they just again, it's a character that's really kind of hard to do, I think, and do well. There's a reason why there hasn't been a long running series since the 80s for him. And so
He's a character that looks cool.
No,
he has a very stylistic costume.
Yeah, the costume is great, and they did really good with the separation of Mr. Knight and Moon Knight and everything with this, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. But and I think the multiple personality thing is interesting in a way to play off of that. So it's just there's a lot there's a lot of great stuff that was in it, but there was a lot of stuff that I don't know, it just didn't click all the way for me personally. And I've heard a lot of people saying that as well. That's not to say that it's a bad show or anything. I thought it was just okay. So, but I also just started watching the second season of Stargirl on HBO Max. That's typically on the CW. It's based on the DC comic, and I'm not a big DC person, but with Stargirl, I have a deeper connection with that because I was a big fan of the 90s Starman series featuring the character of Jack Knight as Starman, and she is a continuation of sorts. The cosmic rod that she uses was Jack's in the comics. In this one, it's the Starman that she gets it from he was originally the Star Spangled Kid, which is a different character completely in the comic books. He's related in some way. His device that he used, which was a gravity belt, was also created by Ted Knight, Jack Knight's father, and so it's all connected. And thankfully, the writer of the Jack Knight Starman series, James Robinson, he's one of the writers and producers of this series, so he's been able to bring in some interesting little bits from the Starman comic book, including a major appearance by the Shade, who's been a DC villain, but in the pages of the Starman comic, he was a friend and sometime hero as well to Starman. So it's interesting to see that playing out similarly with this show. So I'm excited to see where that goes, but I'm only on like episode 5 right now, so it'll be cool. Let's see. I also have a couple more things. I wanted to do a podcast episode while it was available, but I didn't get a chance to. There was a Humble Bundle last month that featured all of the works of Terry Moore, who is the comic book creator of Strangers in Paradise, Echo, Rachel Rising, and more. And just for the Strangers in Paradise alone, it would have been a great deal, but it was literally all of his work, which also has an interconnectedness to it as you go along. A lot of the characters start crossing over into the later books, and so it was interesting to read all that. And I was really happy to finally get a chance to read all of Strangers in Paradise, and I was literally crying at the end just because it was a very emotional ride there. So, but it was if anybody hasn't seen or read Strangers in Paradise before, You should definitely check it out. You can't get the Humble Bundle anymore. It was a really good deal, and it supported charity, but unfortunately, it's not available. And he says he'll never do that again. So it was successful, and he was glad to do it, but he said he'll probably never do it again in his lifetime. But
Wow. Wonder why.
just probably just like one of those things where he's not making much money off of it, so it's really not a great thing for him personally. But it supported the Hero Initiative, which helps older out of work comic creators who because making comics there's no medical, there's no benefits like that, so you got to pay for all
Right.
that out of pocket. And so the Hero Initiative helps with creators who are no longer who might need that kind of help. They may not have that kind of money coming in. So it was a really good deal, a really good cause, and I just wanted to mention it just so in case anybody wants to at least go and check out his books online or in comic book shops. So, and lastly, I want to talk about I finally have caught up on the Kingcast podcast about Stephen King, and including the Shelbyville episodes where they have done a series of episodes where they play a Stephen King based or sort Stephen King adjacent role playing game. And I had a lot of fun listening to that. I'm not generally, I think I've probably mentioned it before on the podcast, generally not an RPG guy. Harrison's been trying for years to get me to play something. I keep going, it's not my thing. But listening to this kind of got me, interested in it a little bit. So I might give it a chance if it's something similar to that. It's based on the Kids on Bikes role playing game. So if it's something similar to that, I think I could kind of get into it. It sounds like fun. So, but if anybody hasn't checked out Kingcast or the Shelbyville episodes are usually part of their Patreon episodes, but they're actually spinning it off into its own podcast. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. All right. Well, now we can segue into the main topic of discussion, which is Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
There's the segue.
What?
There's the segue.
I know. I just said I was segueing.
Just said.
Good Lord, you're not paying attention.
I'm paying attention.
But yes, we all recently got to watch it on opening weekend. We got to watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and we all enjoyed it very much. And being that it is connected in some ways to Spider-Man No Way Home in terms of, multiverse shenanigans, and Doctor Strange is in both, of course, that we thought we would hop on and talk about both of these movies. I am a huge MCU fan, mostly because I'm a huge Marvel Comics fan. Have been all my life. Marvel Comics have been I said it before, it's huge. It's been a huge part of my life, and I've been being able to see these movies since Iron Man began, that seeing them build this interconnected universe and get in a lot of ways get more comic booky has been a blessing to me. Just getting to see these heroes and storylines and everything, even if they're not exactly the same things, they are hitting storylines that I read and loved as a kid, as a teenager, and so that's exciting for me. So we'll get back. We will go ahead and start with Spider-Man No Way Home right now. And what did you guys think?
I generally liked it. I think that it was a good film. I don't necessarily know if it was. A friend of mine asked me the question after I watched Doctor Strange on. Actually, I Actually, I think it was you actually that asked, was it a good movie or if it was a good Marvel movie?
Yeah, I asked that.
And I would say that Spider-Man was a good Marvel movie in that it wasn't a Captain America Winter Soldier. It was something that it felt like it was good for being within the Marvel universe and what it did to kind of play around with adding a lot of like previous characters and kind of mixing the multiverse a little bit with that. But it did feel like that some things just kind of had to happen, so they did. I feel that way very strongly with how the other Spider-Men were introduced. I felt like that was kind of lazy writing. I felt like there might have been a better way to do that. But generally, I'm sure we'll talk more about it. But generally, it was a good film. I enjoyed it. It's the best Spider-Man film to have more than one villain and actually make it work.
Katrina, you look like you were wanting to say something.
I wanted to clarify that I asked him that about Doctor Strange, not about Spider-Man.
Gotcha.
So, but I think the question still applies. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that the way they introduced the other Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, that the way they introduced them was in a way so that they could get a good audience response. Like that was very much and because I watched it, I believe I watched it opening night and with a crowd, and that went over huge. Even though everybody suspected and everybody pretty much knew that this was going to happen, that those scenes went over big because they went and they did it in such a way, I think, so that there was enough of a pause in the dialogue and in the action that everybody could, cheer and get that audience response. So it's clunky, yes, but I think it was definitely an audience moment that they really wanted to get that audience reaction. So I think that, yes, it's clunky, but overall, I've watched it since at home and it doesn't detract anything for me, but, I'm a little more forgiving typically of these Marvel movies than, some people are. Not speaking about you, but, people online can be pretty savage to them at times. So,
I just think that when it comes to these movies, we've seen, I don't know. It's just that when they're introduced, and I get that it's an audience reaction moment, but I think that I would have personally had a much stronger audience reaction if we saw Spider-Man or his friends in trouble and they were being like overpowered by like a couple villains maybe,
right.
And like Spider-Man couldn't fight back because it was just Spider-Man, and then having another Spider-Man swoop in to kind of show up, that would have at least for me would have been more interesting because it would have been, one, a surprise, it would have resolved a problem for the characters, and 3, we would have been able to see them in action and actually have them in action, and then have all of the characters kind of go, even if it was just Ned and MJ in trouble based on a villain, then they and they get rescued by one of the Spider-Men, they're like, wait, who are you?
Right.
Or maybe they go, when did you get the new costume? And then he takes off the mask and it's not their Spider-Man. Right. And they're like, who are you and why do you have a Spider-Man costume?
I can see your point, but I think that part of the reason why they did it the way they did it is because they were specifically looking for Peter Parker, not for Spider-Man. And so, they would, in this instance, they'd be a little bit more inclined to take off their mask in front of some strangers rather than in the heat of a moment and being like, hey, you're not our friend, and then they go, well, let me whip off my mask. Of course I'm not, and so I can kind of see why they did that. Plus, they wanted a more quiet moment. They wanted to play with Ned potentially having magic abilities,
Yeah.
so, I think there was a lot more that goes into it than just, and I'm not saying that your idea is bad, but, I can see their reasoning behind it a little bit more. Katrina, I didn't get your thoughts on the movie.
Oh, we're talking about my thoughts on the whole movie.
Yes.
Yeah, the movie in general.
General review.
I don't remember the facts of a lot of the Spider-Man movies, so, and I didn't rewatch them at all before or after watching this one because I honestly don't really care to. I mean, I probably will at some point, but it will be out of obligation, not out of me wanting to watch them.
Right.
So, but I enjoyed this one. It was fun to watch in the theater. The audience react. One of my favorite parts about watching movies in a theater is the audience reaction.
Right.
And this was a really good movie for that for me. I really liked having that collective experience.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. I think generally it was a good movie. I don't have anything to really say that I was yeah, this part sucked and this part was awesome. I don't have anything like
Right.
that. So I also haven't watched it again. I mean, I was rewatching it today,
Right.
in preparation, but I wasn't able to finish it, so I don't have a lot.
It's okay.
To elaborate on how I look at the Spider-Man film, again, like I said, I consider it good. I don't think it is bad. I just think that there's room for improvement. But with that being said, I think that I am very happy with where Spider-Man is currently at the end of the film. I'm very...
Wow, that's fucked up.
It is, but also it's finally Spider-Man. It's Spider-Man who has to hide behind the mask, and he is a nobody, and he's
got the
great
work. Power comes great responsibility.
He's got the great power, great responsibility, but he's also got to work hard. He's got to go to school. He's got to pay the rent. He's got he's finally that classic Spider. We finally got the spectacular Spider-Man, where he's got all of these life issues and all of this other things, and where not everything's handed to him. He doesn't have a suit that's handed to him by the richest man on the planet. He actually has to make his own suit now. He and that was some of my biggest gripes when they were introducing Spider-Man into the MCU, was that I didn't like it. I didn't like the first two movies didn't make me enjoy the character as much as some of the other Spider-Man films, because it didn't feel like Spider-Man. It felt like Spider-Man with a silver platter. It felt like Spider-Man was just getting handed fancy toys, and we weren't actually getting to see Spider-Man struggle. And that's a huge part of his character, is how much he struggles. And it's just there was a lot that was missing for me, but I think that this movie resolved a lot of it. But yeah, that's my take.
Okay. Katrina, did you?
I was just gonna say that I think that it was a good Spider-Man movie. I think that it didn't. The most recent Marvel movies haven't felt really, really Marvel to me. I know they include a bunch of other characters and stuff, and they mention a bunch of other characters and stuff,
Right.
but it's not how it was with all of the Marvel movies that were prepping for Endgame and
Right.
and Age of Ultron and all of that, because they were specifically like about a certain topic, like that were leading up to this big
Right.
like conclusion. So everything since Black Widow has been, they've just been movies to me.
Right.
Like they've been really good movies, but I think now it,
They're a lot less interconnected and a lot
yeah.
less.
But I like that.
Yeah.
I like that because, like, at least for me, Shang-Chi is one of my favorite movies now.
Right.
Not because it's connected to Marvel, but because it's just a genuinely amazing movie.
Right.
And so when I was watching Spider-Man, comparing it to Shang-Chi, which is in the same company, but it felt just kind of, it wasn't, it was more focused on the people than it was on the story to me. And so that kind of took me out of it because I was like, I don't know who half of these fucking people are. So I didn't understand half of the fucking movie.
Well, that's partially just because
So-
you hadn't watched the other Spider-Man movies
Yeah.
previous to that.
And,
to
like,
the
I'm
Maguires
sure that
and
if
Andrew
I'm
Garfield's.
sure that when I rewatch it, I'll get a better understanding when I rewatch No Way Home again. But
Right.
it just, to me, I didn't feel
No, I get that.
that it was like you came out of it was like, yeah, that was so good, 5 stars out of 5 stars, and then I was just like, yeah, it was a movie, it was
Yeah.
okay. Like
I mean,
I came out of it
the-
like
and-
I came out of it watching like other movies that have come out, like Nightmare Alley or like Moonfall, or like other just
Right.
movies.
You were just
So,
okay with the movie. You liked the
Yeah.
movie, but you were just okay with it, mostly because you
there's
had no
nothing that
connection
stood
to
out.
it.
There's nothing that stood out to me from the movie. Everything was just kind of blah.
Well, and I get that
So-
if you don't have the knowledge of, and that's
Yeah.
the thing
I
with
thought it was
No
funny.
Way
I
Home
literally
is that
I laughed out loud earlier when I was watching it because because I don't know what his character's name is, but Jamie Foxx's character
Electro, yeah.
Electro, he goes, so you're all just gonna stand there like I'm not butt ass naked?
Yeah.
And then Peter Parker is just like, no, and then fucking Sandman's like, I am.
Yeah.
It's just, it was funny. It was a funny
was
movie,
funny.
but
No, I think that if you don't have the knowledge of who those characters are and what they mean to the overall
Yeah.
Spider-Man
And
as a
Spider-Man.
movie thing, then yeah, you're gonna have a disconnect to that for
Yeah.
sure. And Harrison, to your point, like that you like the Peter Parker who basically can never catch a break thing, and basically his life always has to suck for him
He
to be
lives in
Spider-Man.
Queens, come on,
I think that sucks. Honestly, this is what I've liked about the Tom Holland thing, is that his life didn't completely suck. He had, sure, he was still living poor in Queens with his Aunt May and everything, but this was a different version of Spider-Man that got a leg up, that got some chances, got a decent start at being a hero for once. He's still making the mistakes. He's still got the Parker luck. He still has issues, but sure, he had a cool suit and everything. But when it came down to it, it never was about the suit. And like, that was the whole thing in the first Spider-Man movie, was like Iron Man said, if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve the suit. The suit isn't who makes you. And he proved that in the first movie by
Which is
defeating
such a weird thing
Vulture.
for Iron Man to fucking say,
Yeah.
because Iron Man is literally nothing
No,
without
no,
the suit.
'cause that
And
was
I don't
in
want
Avengers.
You, I don't
He's
want
a
you to
billionaire
quote the line
playboy.
because the line is stupid and it literally means nothing.
Hey, but
he basically says, "I'm rich."
yes,
Also, I wear a suit.
Yes.
And so basically he's just a rich guy in a suit that
Yeah.
can do a lot. And
Yeah.
so basically he's nothing
Isn't
without
that what
the suit.
half of the fucking Marvel characters are, to be honest? Just rich people in a suit?
No.
no, most of the rest
Most-
of them actually have powers, but
And also
I-
most of them are poor as hell.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay,
but, like,
fine.
well, again, you haven't watched as many of them and in a while as I have.
Yeah, I've seen all of them now.
Yeah, you've seen them all, but it's been a while since you've seen like a lot of them. You
then-
watched most of them
and
just
some of
once
them-
in the theater, and then that's been it.
some of them in the MCU, they made them not poor, but they made them part of the military.
Yeah.
Like Hawkeye.
But so I personally I enjoy the Tom Holland version because he wasn't at that disadvantage as much as the other Parkers have always been, and have just taken on this guilt aspect of their lives. Now, that changed at the end of this movie, that now he has that guilt driving him
What a
to
great
do that.
moment.
And
That was the moment where I was like, yes.
yeah, but see, to me, I'm like that it's such a dick thing
And you
in
wonder
a way.
why his
like
favorite
I
character
wanted
in
to,
Star Wars is Darth Vader.
well, but here's my thing too, is that even in the
not my
comic
favorite
books,
character.
even in the comic books,
My
his
favorite character is Salacious Crumb.
okay, shut up. Even in the comic books, Peter Parker has this problem with, like, constantly, like, they always go back to status quo. He gets a little something, like at one point he, like, because going into some deep nerdery here, but at one point Dr. Octopus switched minds with Peter and took over his body and was Spider-Man for a while. He was the superior Spider-Man, and he actually did some crazy stuff. He got Peter a doctorate, and he started Parker Industries, this really great tech company that was rivaling Stark. And they had their own phone and their own web OS thing was what they were calling it. And I was like, oh, this is great. Parker's finally, yes, it's Dr. Octopus, but once they switched back, Parker inherited all that. He's like, okay, now this is all mine. Holy crap. I don't like Dr. Octopus having done that, but I actually did something right with my life for once. And so that, and promptly the writers who were on the book promptly fucked him over, made everything collapse on him again, and made it so that Peter was right back to square one, having a shit life in a shit apartment with shit everything going against them.
Because a character who struggles is inherently more interesting than one that doesn't.
Yes, but you can also have other struggles that don't require your life to be in a fucking shambles. And I think that's what frustrates me the most when I read Spider-Man, is that constantly they always make him go back to being in a life of shambles and never being able to really truly be happy in his life, and making it so that the only stuff he gets out of life is being Spider-Man and being that sucks. That's your whole life, is just being Spider-Man, and that gets in the way. And that's where the drama, the friction is supposed to be, is you can have the happy life in a way, but also your responsibilities as Spider-Man gets in the way of that. That creates a friction, yes. That doesn't mean you have to be an unhappy character or have to have a character that constantly has a shitty life. You can have that friction there without it being constantly, And so that's my personal opinion on it. And that's what I liked about Tom Holland's thing, is that friction of his friends getting in danger, his things happening that were because of his responsibilities as Spider-Man, rather than him having a inherently shitty life. And so yes, he got a leg up from Stark here and there, but that didn't really help things in the long run, because he still had obstacles to get past. So that's where I come at it from my point of view, is just like, there's ways to do this in better ways than other than just completely collapsing his life all the time.
I just think, like, even before this movie came out, I know that I was talking to you and criticizing the earlier Spider-Man movies, as well as his involvement in Avengers films and Civil War. And it was summed up very well inside of this film, where all of the Spider-Man are kind of going over their accomplishments, like, for a moment, and he's like, oh yeah, well, like I've been to space, and they're like, you've been to space,
Yeah.
and the other two are like, what? Like, you've been to space? We've never been to space.
And he's been a member of the Avengers, and they're like, "What's the Avengers? Is that a band?"
Yeah.
And so
And like,
yeah,
but,
and
but
their
like,
lives were
that's
shitty.
the thing that is, like, when they voiced that, it distilled it to me what my issues with the Tom Holland Spider-Man are, and in that, like, I don't think Spider-Man needs to be in space. Like, I think that we never got the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, where, yes, his life sucks and it's shit, but despite that, he goes to the streets to make sure that everyone else on the street doesn't have to experience that. And that's the thing that stands out for me versus Spider-Man, is that the fact that he actively makes his life suck because he is Spider-Man more than he is Peter Parker. So he ends up not spending enough time as Peter to actually build anything, because that's the whole idea with the whole
I get that.
Superior Spider-Man thing, was that Doc Ock spent
Focused
more
on
time as Peter to get
yeah.
things to a point where Peter was in a good place, rather than Peter, who spends more time as Spider-Man,
Right.
because he's spending more time trying to help people and protect people.
Right.
And so,
No, but here's my thing: is
and so
you
that's
look.
what makes him a hero to me, is that it's self-sacrifice. It's the act of having that terrible life as your alter ego, and being the hero in the streets.
But that
like,
sucks.
Because
that, to me,
otherwise
that's,
we get an Iron Man, where Iron Man is like, literally his whole character concept was, yes, I'm a rich guy. Also, here's Iron Man. He's my bodyguard. And that's my whole alter ego story. That's not interesting. That's the reason why they had to make him an alcoholic, because they had to give him something.
They give him, but see, that's the other thing, is that
give his
Iron Man
character some
became
depth.
the corporate, like, you know, he was fighting like bigger villains and corporate like things and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there was a whole other aspect of that and everything. And I'm not saying that you're necessarily wrong, but for me as a person who likes Spider-Man, is especially because I've read a lot of the comic books, is that when you get Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and they're like, well, our life has sucked since the last time you saw us. Andrew Garfield's has gotten bitter and angry and everything, and
Tobey had to work hard.
Then Toby's still working
his
hard
life together.
to get his life together and everything, and it's just like, to a certain extent, like, I get it, and I'm not saying that people don't need to work hard or whatever like that, but like, I just feel like it sucks to have to be a good hero. You also have to sacrifice all of the other parts of your life and have your life basically be shitty to be that hero. Why would you even want to be that hero? Like, why would you even do that? Your life is crumbling around you. You barely live.
Because you're not doing it for yourself.
I know that. But what I'm saying, though, is that, yes, you can sacrifice and you can be helping people and everything like that. But that doesn't, as a story, that only goes so far. For me, anyway, that at a certain point,
that's why
that starts to become.
That's why he has Aunt May.
But he doesn't always have MJ and Aunt May.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Because he's Spider-Man.
Because he's Spider-Man, and shit goes bad all the
and
time.
He can't put them in danger because he's Spider-Man.
But that's where the other friction should come from. That's where the other issue should come from. Not always just having this shitty life. That's all I'm saying. And that's why I liked. That's why I like the Tom Holland stuff.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that I'm not going to enjoy whatever comes with Tom Holland now being his character, his version of Spider-Man, being in that, being in the slummy, like, New York apartment and having to struggle and everything like that. Sure, that could be interesting. But I enjoyed these movies and this version of Spider-Man because it showed a different version could exist, that could be somewhat happy, could have friends, could have family, and everything else that...
And then some new writer came along, just like in the comics.
Yeah, exactly.
And swept the rug underneath him. And ruined his life.
But
so,
going back into the other stuff, because, we want to tie this all together, too, is, this was great, not just for bringing the Spider-Man in, but also the villains from a lot of the past movies, and tying it all together, bringing it all back,
giving them closure,
and giving them closure, giving them a lot of closure that they didn't get because, Tobey Maguire his version was supposed to get a fourth movie that didn't get off the ground, and then they went into the Andrew Garfield movies instead, and he was supposed to get a third movie and never got that, and so this is in a way their version of closure for their characters, so that we can move on with Tom Holland's and everything. So it was a nice little thing with that, but also getting to see the villains and getting to kind of redeem Dr. Octopus's character.
So great. Because, it's nice to actually see Doctor Octopus actually.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
was
it was
a good guy.
It was
Like,
really good to see
he was a
them
good guy
all
by the
again
end of that
because
one.
they all held true to their original, you characters,
Mm-hmm.
and getting to see them all again, especially Doctor Octopus and Norman Osborn.
Also, just to see Electro actually done right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
actually getting to see Electro be Electro. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm sorry, Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like, you made a blue guy with blue lightning, and he really didn't do a whole lot.
No,
Like in this
and that was
one-
based more on the Ultimate Universe version of Electro. So getting to see a more
Yeah, but actually getting to see him
like, and then with the electricity mask of sorts was like the best. Like,
Well,
as
and
a big
I
comic book
I don't
nerd, I
remember
was
in
happy to see
Amazing
they
Spider-Man-
tried to do something
Yeah.
similar.
I don't remember in Amazing Spider-Man 2 if he did the like electricity teleporting thing. And
Yeah, it's been a while since I had seen it too, so I don't.
And that was
remember.
something that like really stood out to me as like something really cool that is a part of the comic
Yeah.
book character that I don't know if they brought into Amazing Spider-Man 2. And so actually watching him get to do that where he like just went to place to place to place and like
So-
that was really cool.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, the villains were great.
I had issues. I was a little
Did you know
afraid because
Sandman was completely CGI?
was he?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it was motion capture, but then
Like not with the actor at all.
he was never in the
He-
room with them.
He only did voice work, from my understanding.
That's weird.
The shot at the end, the shot at the end of the movie where he transforms back into himself, that's a shot from Spider-Man 3 that they
Added
if
it,
I'm remembering
inserted.
correctly, I think they like mirrored it and then like inserted it and then did a bunch of other kind of CGI like to
Interesting.
kind of make it fit into the scene, like change the lighting on his face and stuff like that. And so
Interesting. I mean, I could see for the most part like them doing a lot of digital, but I would have thought that they would have done some motion
a little
capture
bit of
with him.
de-aging with
Well,
some of the
yeah, and I would just thought they would have done some motion capture with him being in the rooms and stuff like that when he's sitting down next to him and everything. That's
completely
wild.
CGI character.
interesting.
4 levels of CGI character.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's cool what they're doing with everything. But yeah, I getting back into the multiversal aspect of it. I mean, I think this is outside of Loki, the Loki TV series. This is our first big screen real
yeah.
taste of multiversal events, and of course, Doctor Strange was part of that, which will lead into the next movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was really interesting to see that as a comic book fan, getting to get these movies that are actually a lot more comic book feeling and everything has been like so fun because now we're stepping into, the MCU for a while was getting very like, pretty earthbound, even with Thor and Loki and everything like that. A lot of that was still happening on Earth. And so then we started getting kind of crazy with Guardians of the Galaxy and everything else. And now we're just getting nuts with multiverses and, it's the Eternals, which is like,
That's all the Celestials.
Yeah.
Shang-Chi introduced the mystic realm. That's
Yeah.
in that one.
so we're getting a lot more interesting, cool things going on that is really fun in a lot of ways. And I hope that, we're leading into a lot of this. I think the next movie coming out is Thor Love and Thunder, and then the next TV series coming out is Miss Marvel, so that'll be a fun one too. But
Which already in the trailers we've seen things like Olympus and
yes, for Thor Love and Thunder, yeah.
and obviously he looks like he's doing a little bit of planet hopping in that one.
Yeah, so
Which honestly I'm kind of interested of because from the Thor comics that I have read, that is very on brand for
Oh,
Thor
yeah.
to do a whole lot of planet hopping, and so it'll be cool to actually see him do that. And I know he's done it a little bit, but Doctor Strange,
well, I mean, so I'm not sure if we're done with Spider-Man or not. I don't know if I have anything more to talk about Spider-Man. If I do, I'll go back to it. But yeah, Doctor Strange. It's a little more fresh on our minds. We all just recently saw it, so I will start and just say I had a blast. As much as I had a blast with Spider-Man, I had just as much a blast with this one, if not more so in a lot of ways, because it's the return of Sam Raimi as a director, who hasn't directed a movie since Oz the Great and Powerful, and his last actual horror movie before that was Drag Me to Hell. So but he did direct an episode of Ash versus Evil Dead, so it's not like he was completely out of the horror realm all this time. But he he's back in a big way. This felt more like a Sam Raimi film, more like a horror, like very much a horror mashup with comic books, in a way that I really enjoyed. And like, so going back to the Spider-Man movies, I love Sam Raimi. Everybody who knows me knows that I am a huge Evil Dead fan. I've got posters up here in my office here that are just obviously a whole wall dedicated to Evil Dead, and so I love those movies. I love Sam Raimi's work, but I did not really dig on his Spider-Man movies. Part of it was it wasn't really him necessarily. I think I just didn't enjoy most of the casting. I've never been a big fan of Tobey Maguire being Spider-Man, and Kirsten Dunst never rang true for me as MJ, that version of MJ. So it was just, for me, it's a little bit, those movies were just eh. So when I heard that he was going to be doing the new Doctor Strange, and he was the replacement director for it, I was like, okay, hopefully this will go someplace really awesome. And it fucking did. It's so good. And anybody who hasn't seen it yet, please know that this is going to be spoilery. And if you don't want to listen to don't want to be spoiled if you haven't seen it yet, please click off now. I will not be upset, but come back and re-listen to it later. But yes, this movie is so good. It does everything a Sam Raimi movie like that I enjoy. Evil Dead, Drag Me to Hell, like The Quick and the Dead, like all the great shots and everything else, just so good. And the storyline itself, having Wanda, when you're watching those trailers, I didn't pick up on it, and I've seen other people, I guess, sort of picked up on it. Yes, there was going to be a bad version of Wanda, but I thought there were going to be two versions of Wanda. I mean, there were, but I thought one of them was going to be a good version. Our Wanda was going to be good, and there was going to be an evil multiversal version of her that was bad, that they had to deal with. And I thought that was going to be the same thing with Doctor Strange, was that there was going to be more bad versions of him that we were going to have to contend with, such and such. But it was interesting to see that our MCU version of Wanda was the big bad for the whole movie. And following up on the events of WandaVision, that at the end of WandaVision, I think most of us assumed that she was mostly okay. Yeah, she was studying the Darkhold and everything, so it was going to affect her in some way, but I don't think that any of us really expected her to go full on bad guy. And that was very interesting to me. I was excited to see that descent even more, because as you guys know, I've told you guys about the comic books. One of the major comic book storylines that I enjoyed when I was a teenager was the John Byrne run on Avengers West Coast, where Wanda lost her kids and devolved into madness at that point. So that's a lot of that plays into WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness. So it to me, that's like it's not one for one, of course, but a lot of that played out in a MCU version of that storyline. So that was fun. So, but what did you guys think, Katrina?
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than Spider-Man,
Right?
Because I I felt like I could understand it more.
Right.
And I didn't watch WandaVision, but I watched the 30-minute recap of WandaVision by Filmcram. Like literally the day of
Right.
we were gonna watch it. I watched that recap, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, and that's why I started watching WandaVision, was because it intrigued me
Right.
more, and after watching Doctor Strange, it has intrigued me more. And so then I asked Dad to give me Wanda comics. So I have that Avengers West Coast thing, and I'm about to start reading it. And so Wanda, I didn't have like a connection to Wanda before, but now I love her. Like I love her character so much. I think she's so cool. And then I just finished Civil War, and at the end of that or not Civil War, sorry, Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And so after I finished watching Winter Soldier, there was that end credit scene where you see the twins, and Wanda's just like so badass. Like what the fuck? I just think she's so cool. But in the case of Doctor Strange, I really liked it, and I love America Chavez's character.
Yes.
I love that character so much. I think that power is really, really cool. And I think her star thing is also really cool.
Yeah.
And I love that she's gay and I'm gay. So
Yes.
I think that representation is important. Even just having a little pin just on her jacket the entire movie is just so important.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that Marvel's done that. I know that Marvel has had a tricky past with that, because there was a scene in one of their movies where two women kissed at the end of it, and when they sent it over to China to watch,
right.
they censored that portion of it, and I don't think that was a thing that Marvel did. I think that was just China
Right.
censorship.
Yeah, when they have to send things over to other countries, and China's not the only one, but
Yeah.
the other countries that do not want gay or lesbian representation
It's still
in their
considered like
movies,
vulgar.
they will have it edited out of the movie completely.
Unfortunately.
And so they, I read somewhere that there was something recently that was going to be, it wasn't China, it was someplace else, and the movie that they wanted edited, and the studio said no, and they're just not going to have it in that country, which is going to be a revenue loss for them, but it's a good stance to take.
Yeah.
If you can't have your, the vision of what you want on there, even if it's a minor little thing, if you can't put up with that, then you don't deserve watching the movie.
That's cool.
So that's my opinion for that country, because it's let it go, people.
Yeah.
So.
But anyways,
yes, America Chavez is a great character.
yes.
I've enjoyed her in the comic books. She's really cool.
You gotta
She's
send me
got
the comics for her.
say what?
You gotta send me the comics for her.
I'll find some good stuff for you. But yeah, we in the comic books, she's much more powerful. She's got flight and strength and invulnerability, and and she punches those kick-ass
Oh my
star
God.
star portals into
So
multiverses, and so it's real fun. It's a lot of fun.
I love powerful women in the MCU.
Yeah.
During that one fucking scene in Endgame,
Endgame,
where
all the women,
where all they were just
yeah.
fucking walking up and just fucking beating the shit out of all of them. God, it's so good. God, I remember getting chills in the theater watching that, because I was just like, fuck yeah, women, fuck. Oh.
All right, Harrison, what'd you think?
I liked it. It was good. I enjoyed it for the fact that it was a Sam Raimi horror film, in the MCU, and I think that it had a lot of really cool like body horror stuff going on in it, and so that was
true.
that's up my alley. If people remember my horror taste, and so especially when Wanda crawls out of the gong. That image kind of stays with me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot. I think that it was very good. I liked seeing the Illuminati.
Yes.
I enjoyed seeing a lot of those characters finally get introduced into the
Yes.
MCU.
We need to get that
Uh,
John Krasinski led Fantastic
Yes.
Four movie. I mean,
If there was,
getting to see that, I really hope that's not just a one and done. Like,
I'm
oh,
worried.
that'll kill
I'm worried
me.
it's one and done.
I
because
know, I
it was
am
good.
too.
It was
but
good.
I really want them to do it.
I thought he did a good job.
Did a great job, yeah.
But
That was fun.
but it was good. I think my one criticism for it is that I think that Spider-Man No Way Home started something that I think might carry through a lot of these Marvel films, where it will progressively become where you have to engage with all of Disney's MCU media to fully understand the plots of these movies. There's no longer the casual MCU watcher. You can't watch a film and enjoy it just for the sake of enjoying the film anymore. Now it is, if you want to you can, I feel that you can watch the Avengers films and not need to know the lead up and necessarily the events that led up to an Avengers film, because Loki in Avengers 1 shows up, completely unrelated villain to really any other plots other than the fact that Thor is there. Second is Ultron, which only exists within that film, and so that one, like, it's just seeing the heroes fight. And then Infinity War and Endgame, in those ones, I feel that the Russo brothers did a decent job of actually giving just enough background to each of the stone locations to provide that background, because really that's the only information you need when it comes to Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet, was like that at some point the stone found its way here. But again, that just means that the entire movie is still just a scavenger hunt. It's just that if you watched all the other movies and all the after credit scenes, you'd be like, oh yeah, well of course it's there because I saw it there in the last movie. Whereas with Spider-Man, if you have not seen any of the previous Spider-Man films, you will be a little lost. There's some scenes in that movie where, like, they make reference to things and you'll just kind of be sitting there like, and you already talked about that. And then the inside of Doctor Strange.
He means you as in me.
Yes.
I know that.
Yes, Katrina.
I know that some of
Yes.
you will probably understand that, but
Yeah.
I think that it's important to clarify.
And then as for Doctor Strange, I think that you are at a great disservice and will be, and I think you will be very confused to the primary plot if you have not at least watched a 30-minute recap on WandaVision before watching the film, because it is that the results of that show are so central to the plot of this film. And I think that it really requires kind of a perspective shift to put yourself in the shoes of someone who has not watched it, to kind of look at the movie critically and go, yeah, it doesn't make sense if you haven't watched it.
Right. Okay, Katrina, you wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say that I think that you can still watch it with the recaps. You don't have to watch all of the stuff that came before. You can just watch recaps or read articles and stuff.
That's basically
so
what I was saying, is that, like,
when you
should...
were first talking, it sounded like you can't do anything but watch the rest of the media. Like you said, you have to watch the Disney MCU.
You have to be
stuff.
aware of it, is
like,
what
that's,
he's trying
that's
to
what
say.
You were saying,
Yeah,
but
I'm basically saying, like, to understand this film, you have to, like I said, you have to watch like a 30-minute recap.
So I think that there is. So here's my opinion on it, and I'm going to be at a different level of this than you guys are. One, because I watch and absorb all of these, and I've watched most of these movies several times, but I also come at it from a comic book reader perspective. Now, Spider-Man No Way Home, yes, to get the full effect of that, you really needed to watch all the Spider-Man movies before that. You really needed to have watched, and I don't mean just his, but you needed to watch Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's and everything featuring Spider-Man up until that point to get the full effect of what that movie was going to be. I think they actually did a disservice to people going into that movie by not showing, like, they showed, at least in the commercials, they showed that the villains of the previous movies were going to be in there. So thankfully they did that. But not letting people know, even though everybody freaking knew that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were going to show up in those movies, that they really should have done that and said, those are coming. Really rewatch these movies just to be familiar with it, because just in case something happens, let's do that. But with Doctor Strange, though, I think that you can still watch that movie without having that prior knowledge. Sure, you're going to be at a slight disadvantage. I don't think you're at a full disadvantage. You get enough information in that movie to know that Wanda had some kids at some point between the movies. If you have not watched WandaVision and you've watched at least some of the other movies that she's been in, you'll know that something happened between Endgame and Doctor Strange 2 that happened to Wanda, that she had kids. Somehow they're grown to, pre-teen age, and that they are gone now. And so, yes, you should watch WandaVision before you go into watching this movie, just so you have that knowledge. But if you don't, they give you just enough. And this is how comic books work, though, too, is that in the comic books, they're not going to give you all this backstory. They're going to jump you into a storyline and then go, we're referencing something. They might have an editor's note in there going, well, this event happened to Wanda in this situation, and you're going to have to go back and read that. And I think that's the case in this one, too, is that, sure, you might be at a slight disadvantage. I don't think it's a terrible one. I don't think that you're going to be that overly confused. You might be slightly confused. But if you go and then you watch this movie, if you enjoy what they're showing, if you enjoy Wanda's storyline, then you go back and go, okay, I want to fill in that plot hole now. I want to fill in that story hole for me, not a plot hole, but I want to fill in that story gap for me that I didn't watch yet. And so, yes, I think to an extent, Marvel is doing something where they are interconnected enough, and they were getting pretty interconnected. Endgame and Infinity War, you had to have watched at least enough of the previous movies to really get the full effect of that. Sure, you could watch it without that stuff, but I really think you need to watch most of the movies leading up to that before you get to those movies to get the full effect of that. And the same, but we're also now at a time where we're getting the Eternals, Shang-Chi, and those two movies, and maybe more, will be less connected to things. Those two movies, especially Eternals and Shang-Chi, they had connections to the MCU and stuff, but they weren't dependent on those connections. And so you got these interesting stories, regardless of whether or not people liked Eternals or not, which, most people seem to not have enjoyed Eternals as much, but they're still connected, and but they're also not connected in a way to give you a different perspective of areas of the Marvel Universe that are fun and interesting. So I think they're kind of trying to do both now. And like I said, even with Moon Knight. So we've had in the TV shows, we've had WandaVision, we had Falcon and Winter Soldier, we had Loki. Those were all holdovers from the previous phases and continued those storylines and moving forward in the new phase. But Moon Knight is a completely separate, completely new thing. There's no real ties to anything going on. There's a couple of background mentions, things that people have picked up on in like books or something else in the background, like the history of Wakanda or something like that. That is little Easter egg type things, but it's not dependent on anything happening in the past, and it sets itself completely outside of any of that, so that it's not doing that. So I think that they're having their cake and eating it too. They're getting to have these side stories, these side movies and such that don't require you to have this full knowledge, but also doing it for those of us who have been following along, and you get the deeper, fun aspects of like Doctor Strange and No Way Home and stuff like that. If you've been following along the whole time, boom, this is for you, and that's what's fun. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, that it can be confusing. It can be hard for people. But I feel like that's kind of the price you pay with these movies now. Like, if you don't want that kind of stuff, I get it. there's a lot of people who I see on Twitter and elsewhere who are just like, oh my God, the hype around all these Marvel movies sucks. I'm tired of this.
We get a basically what the Marvel movies have become is that the films themselves are 2.5 hour episodes of a TV show that we all catch.
You motherfucker. I was waiting for so long for Dad to finish his stuff, and you saw me opening my mouth to try and say shit, and then you fucking say the exact thing that I was gonna fucking say.
To an extent,
Go
I
on.
agree. To
Go
an
on.
extent, I agree with you.
No regrets.
He always fucking does this.
2.5 hour episode of a TV show that we catch and then discuss until the next quarter, and then we get another one, and then we get another one and another one, and then
But again, I do think that, like, if you look at it, like in terms of Shang-Chi, Moon Knight, Eternals, we're starting to get these things that are a little less.
and then we get our
interconnected.
season finales, which are
So-
the Avengers films,
Yeah.
where
But
we get to see
if you
everything
look-
come together.
If you look at comic books in general, this is how the comic books are. You get people's side stories. You get these movies and TV shows that have guest or like these, not movies and TV shows, but you're getting the comic books in the comic book world. You get storylines in their comic books where say, okay, so this Doctor Strange movie feels like a 6-issue run of a storyline in Doctor Strange, guest starring Wanda, and crazy stuff is happening. And then we'll get maybe the next movie with Doctor Strange will be just mostly Doctor Strange stuff, his own stuff, not tied to any of that stuff, and getting him to the next point, which is what it kind of seems like based on the mid-credit scene. So again, spoilers, with Clea showing up and pulling him into another universe, we're going to get more of a Doctor Strange storyline completely outside of anybody else, which will be fun, which will be interesting and great. But that's how I view it. And then these comic books will lay
something to mention about this film.
Okay, real quick.
Criticism of mine.
So these comic books will do the same thing, in you'll get scattered references to something, and then all of a sudden it'll pop up, and then you'll get this big storyline that they were gearing towards, and all these other things. Or maybe it's just in the Avengers books, they're leading up to something over the course of several years, and they lead up to this giant mega event that involves everybody, and that's the Avengers movies. And so that's what they're doing, but they're just doing it in movie form. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is basically they've taken what they do in comic books and they're doing it in movie form, TV version form. And for me, as a comic book fan, going into these movies, this is fantastic for me. I'm enjoying this so much. I can understand that if you're outside of that and you don't understand comic books, or even if you do understand comics and you don't like that aspect of it, I understand that. It sucks. But me personally, I enjoy it, and I hope they continue it.
I honestly think it's a really cool thing that the MCU is doing by making it kind of like Harrison said, 2.5 hour
Yeah.
episodes of a series. I think that's a really,
I love it.
I think that's a really interesting and unique idea. I know that they're probably not trying to do that, but that's how they're doing it, and I
Right.
think that that's really cool. And I feel
Well, they pick up from threads from another movie, and
watching,
then okay, I'm going to
watching
do this.
Doctor Strange would be like watching season 6 of Game of Thrones. You don't know what the fuck is happening.
Yeah.
You have no fucking clue. Or watching even the 5th movie of the Harry Potter series.
Right.
That you don't know what's going on, so you're
Right.
gonna have to watch those previous things.
I think
and
that-
so
yeah.
it's just
They're
that's
creating
how
a
movies
franchise.
that's how movies in a series are.
Yeah.
And that's how it happens. It's I know that people really, really want to be casual fans of Marvel,
Right.
but for something as big as this, and for something that has this big of a history,
Right.
they tried to do it for as long as possible. But at this point, it's
I think
gonna
Marvel's
be
just
very
leaned right into it
difficult.
because it worked well leading up to Endgame, and once they realized, people seem to be into it, let's double down on it. Let's just keep going with that. You were going to say something, Harrison, about a criticism?
I was just going to say that another one of my criticisms about this film is that it... Oh, I am blanking on what it was. I don't remember. It was something in regards to, I think you were saying that this wasn't necessarily a Doctor Strange movie. It was just kind of that. Oh, right. Okay. What I was going to discuss was that I was somewhat expecting, because this is how the trailers were presented, that this film was going to deal with the consequences of the Spider-Man incident where
right.
the multiverses collided there. Because that's what it seemed like in the trailers.
Right.
Was that Doctor Strange was going to be going through some kind of like mental madness himself
Right.
because he was the one who caused it all and closed it all.
Right.
But come to watch the movie, Doctor Strange really doesn't have any madness. He has the one dream at the beginning, which is a very kind of Lovecraftian concept.
Right.
And then after that point, it's all Wanda. Like Wanda is the person who's being corrupted by the Darkhold. Even when we see Doctor Strange use the Darkhold, like there really isn't any like lasting like madness. It's just
there's
a
a little
physical
bit.
change, but that's not madness. That's
But we
not,
don't know if that physical change is going to lead to madness.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I was somewhat hoping to actually kind of see something more in the vein of like, hey, Doctor Strange, maybe you shouldn't have like done some multiversal magic so willy-nilly, and like I don't know, because like the first movie was about Doctor Strange being humbled, and then the second I thought that the second movie kind of had the opportunity to continue that kind of story of that at least for myself, I would imagine someone who exists in the one timeline in which they defeated Thanos might be a little arrogant and might be thinking that he's top dog and that he did a good and all that. And we sort of see that a little bit, but he doesn't kind of get slapped. Like he doesn't.
But I think he does, though. This is the
like,
whole point of this, is that no matter what he does, he still isn't going to get Christine. And he has to learn how to become happy with that.
Yes.
How he has to move on from that, and to, like she says, is to give up the blade. Give up being in control all the time and learning to trust in others and to not just be the arrogant guy that he was. So I think that's where
I think he
did
grow.
He
a
grew.
lot in this
He grew a
movie,
little
so-
bit.
and I think that the whatever madness or the effects of things that we're gonna get are gonna be in the next movie.
He bowed to the sorcerer's
and we have to
Supreme.
remember that this movie was the multiverse of madness. It wasn't going to be him being madness, gaining any madness. It was just the multiverse itself was crazy. So and having to deal with all of that. So I think that there has been some criticism. I've seen people online that people were wanting to see more multiverses. They were wanting to see more crazy stuff. They were wanting to see all these different versions of characters.
That for this
and
film.
the fact that they mostly were just in one multiverse the whole time. And it's just like, but that's the multiverse they needed to be in to resolve this issue.
Yeah.
So if they had bounced around and did a whole bunch of fan servicey stuff and everything, that's what is what people are wanting, is this just real fan servicey, like wink and nod type stuff. And I'm like, yes, that's fun, but that's not a story. That doesn't make for good storytelling.
No, like basically people wanted cameos. Like people
And that's-
wanted,
yeah,
people
literally
wanted to,
just-
people wanted to see Deadpool. Like people wanted to see like more X-Men. People wanted to see like more
And I
other
get
characters.
it. Trust me, I want to see the MCU's version of the X-Men. I want to see. I mean, that was great, but it's we'll get there. But I don't want. I want it to come organically. I don't want it to be forced in. I want it to be something that comes through as naturally as possible. It's not always going to work well because it just doesn't. But when it works, it works. And I think that overall this movie works more than it doesn't. And I still think that they complement each other. Both of these movies complement each other, not just because Doctor Strange is a part of it, but because it's leading more into this multiversal thing that we might be able to start exploring these new things. And this might be it for multiverses for a while. We might not see anything about that. So we're going to get, Thor, like we said, we're getting Thor, we're getting a new Captain Marvel movie soon, we're getting a second Black Panther soon. So we're
I think we're mainly setting up our new Avengers,
Yeah.
and I mean that as a very loaded term, as in not just the new film, but also a brand new team.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we've got a few important heroes that have popped up along the way that are definitely going to be a part of this new Avengers. We got our very, very alluded to Cersei in Eternals. We've got our Shang-Chi. We've got our America Chavez. We've got our new and improved Spider-Man.
Right.
We've got our I think we're probably closing Thor's story, possibly in Love and Thunder, because it's kind of wrapping up his relationship with I'm blanking out, Jane Foster. And wrapping up possibly because he says in the trailer his days of being a superhero are done.
Right.
And so he might be doing other things.
Well, I think that, in terms of Avengers and stuff like that, I think they're really building up to the young Avengers. We've gotten America Chavez. We've gotten Kate Bishop's Hawkeye. Yep. We've gotten Scarlet Witch's twins, who are also play into characters that...
I haven't seen them do anything, though.
Well, no, because they still need to grow to teenage, actual teenage young adult
Wasn't
status.
there stuff that they did in WandaVision, though?
Nope.
They do
no,
stuff?
they did.
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought they
had
did.
powers at the end.
I guess they did. Yeah.
And then we've gotten the grandson of I'm blanking on his name, but the grandson of the Black Captain America in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So we're getting little bits and pieces. We're getting multiple versions of Kang, possibly from Loki, and one of those.
Well, we already got Immortus.
No, we got a version of Kang who is farther, at the end of his timeline, at the end of time, which actually is a version of a character. So I mean, it's not related to Immortus. But yeah. So I mean, but I'm sure we're gonna get Immortus. I'm sure we're gonna get the Scarlet Centurion. But there is a young Nathaniel Richards version of Kang that is called Iron Lad, who travels back in time and becomes part of the Young Avengers as well. So we're getting, I think we're getting a lot of this that they're really, and then we're getting Ant-Man's daughter, who becomes Stature in the next Ant-Man movie. So
also Kang.
Yeah, so this is a lot. Yeah, and Kang is supposed to be in that movie predominantly as a villain. So we're getting a lot of the young Avengers starting to pop up more, and so we could be leading more into that.
We're getting like a new Avengers, but also a young Avengers building up at the same time, and so it's like I'm wondering if there's going to be a Disney Plus show.
That's what I was just about to say.
For the Young Avengers, and then an Avengers film
could be
for all of the new people like Cersei and Shang-Chi.
And we could be getting something along the lines of Champions also, which is a book that Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan's character, is a part of, with a younger Hulk-like guy, Amadeus Cho's character. We haven't been introduced to him in the MCU yet, but that he's part of that. So is a young Nova, and Miles Morales is on that team as well. So we haven't gotten any of those other than Kamala Khan about to pop up in the MCU, but it'd be kind of cool to get a little Champions in there as well.
One more thing in the future is going to be Black Knight. So we have to think about that too. Like, how is that going to play into stuff?
Yeah, and the Black Knight is an Avenger. So
also, how I keep thinking about the end
also
credit
Blade.
scene.
Also, Blade was introduced. So
well,
we also have Blade.
Yeah, the voice of Blade so far, so we haven't seen anything
I
about
keep thinking about the end credit scene for Shang-Chi, where they're talking about what the rings are
it. What
composed
the rings
of.
are, yeah.
So it's like,
Well, it's a beacon of some. That's
Yeah,
what they said.
yeah,
It's a
there's a
beacon to
beacon.
something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but what is it?
Well, and again, because the
Oh, boy.
if I'm remembering correctly, that the original rings of the Mandarin were came from an alien spaceship, and so it's they've been altered slightly for the MCU. They're like armbands instead of actual rings that go on your finger, and so this will be interesting if they're playing into some aspect of that where they come from a alien civilization, the Skrulls, the Kree, the Shi'ar, something
You
like
think
that
we might see?
would be very
You
interesting.
think we might see any hint of that in Thor: Love and Thunder, because you guys talked about him planet hopping? So
I mean, it's possible, but I doubt that they would play too much into that
yeah,
right now.
maybe just like a hint or something.
Yeah. I think they're gonna. I think they may just keep that relegated to any Shang-Chi
I just
sequel
really
right
want
now.
him to be more part
Honestly-
of the MCU. I think he's such a cool.
No, I
character.
love Shang-Chi the movie. It was really good. I've never been a big fan of the character and the comic books and stuff. I didn't dislike him, but it just never grabbed me. But the movie was fun. I really enjoyed that. It was a fun movie, and it moved a lot of that storyline.
Did
that'd
Moon
been
Knight
around for a
add
while.
anything relevant to the overall MCU that we should be aware of?
I mean, we get another afterlife. That's something that
Okay.
people have been talking about. We get an Egyptian afterlife, so now we've gotten multiple afterlives because
We've
we've gotten the Wakandan.
yes,
afterlife
we've
as
seen the
well.
Wakandan one. We've seen the Infinity War afterlife, where he snaps himself into that empty realm,
Oh, right,
where he speaks with Gamora.
right. That might be related to the Soul Gem, though. So,
True.
so that one may be completely separate.
So
from
like
that.
Tiny Gamora and Black Widow, like as a kid, are all just kind of like hanging out in this like empty soul
Soul
realm
Gem.
together.
Well, and I mean, that could play into maybe how we get Black Widow back at some point if they ever do that.
Also, yeah,
I'll-
Black Widow. Was there anything in Black Widow that's like was in an after credit scene? I don't
It
think
was
so.
The
it
after
was just
credits
it was
scene
just
was-
a hint to Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Oh right, it was
yeah.
just a Hawkeye thing.
Elena
yeah.
going after Hawkeye. Yeah.
Oh God.
But yeah, so it's so the future of the MCU is going to be interesting. We'll see where it all goes, but
Kind of diverging from the current topic of the
yeah, no,
podcast,
but I mean it all. But I mean, obviously, it all connects to it all, and that's inherently what we're talking about with these movies is just how interconnected they are. How and this is the thing that I would suggest to people anyway. In general, watch all the movies, watch all the TV shows. They're good. I wouldn't say everything is great, but most of them are good to awesome. And so
Can I
yeah,
can I throw out a wild theory really quickly?
sure.
Sure.
So we have all this multiverse nonsense, and we're getting some more Into the Spider-Verse coming out soon from the Sony side.
Next year though they bumped
Yes,
it.
next year.
So, yeah.
And then we're getting a part 2 for that as well.
Yeah, it's like a two-part.
In regards to that, I'm wondering if that short little moment inside of Doctor Strange was not a what if reference, where they go inside of the little animated realm,
right.
but an implication that Miles Morales might transfer from his animated realm into a live action form, and that would add a lot of really interesting.
Holy shit, I'm losing my shit right now. That would be so cool.
So, but this leads into what was happening that was referenced in the Doctor Strange movie, and that was the incursions.
Yes.
And so the incursions started in Jonathan Hickman's run on the Avengers, which led up to the miniseries event Secret Wars. And basically what happened is exactly what happens in the movie, is that two universes are colliding, and in they can either try to destroy one or the other so they can survive, or they just collide and destroy each other. So in the Secret Wars, what ended up happening was something happens where the MCU proper and the Ultimate Universe are colliding with each other, and I think they're either the last ones or something else. And then basically what happens is, instead of destroying each other, they don't necessarily combine, but there are things that get destroyed along the way. A lot of the Ultimate Universe stuff doesn't cross over, but in the end, Miles and his family and his friend, everything that is Miles stuff comes over. And there are some other implications. There's a in that universe. There's evil Reed Richards, that version of Reed Richards in that.
Because we've already seen Spider-Man related stuff, move into the MCU because we had our after credit scene in Spider-Man where we saw a little bit of Venom goop transfer from
So we might
the
be getting an
Venomverse
MCU
into,
version of Venom. Yeah.
and so I mean, there's a lot of room
No,
for
there is.
a possibility of Miles like heading
Yeah.
in. Maybe that throwaway line from Electro about a black Spider-Man was a hint, and then the hint along the way in Doctor Strange where they go animated was also a hint along the way.
Well, and we
So
also already might have Miles in this universe because
we already have
Donald Glover's
yes.
character in the first Spider-Man movie was
right?
his uncle.
Yeah.
And he mentions having a nephew that he wants to protect and everything, and that nephew is Miles. So it's like, so we might already have a version of Miles in this universe who may or may not become Spider-Man. So the sky is the limit with it all, and that's what's really fun now, is that they seem to really be enjoying taking these chances. I think they're at a point now where they can start throwing things at the wall and going, let's see what sticks. Let's see if something hits, if something doesn't. Like Eternals. Eternals was a big gamble to begin with.
Eternals was a gamble for Marvel to begin with, like from
Yeah.
a comic perspective.
Yeah, and the comic has never been that overly, popular. It has its fans
I think
and everything,
I
but the Eternals as a
strongly
whole.
believe that Eternals was a means to an end to get Cersei into.
Well, I
into
think
the-
it's more
into
than
the
that,
universe,
but
'cause
I think they were
Cersei's
just trying to tell the
powers-
history of the Marvel universe in a way.
Because Cersei's powers are, of all of the Eternals, Cersei's power seems like it's the one that has the most like
Transmutation,
narrative potential
Yeah.
in a team format.
Right.
And so
Well, and Cersei in the comic books was a member of the Avengers for a while
exactly.
too. So.
And if we're going off of
So is
the idea
Gilgamesh,
that we are kind of building off of that, then that's the
And
case.
speaking of the Eternals and everything else like that, there is currently an Eternals comic book series going on, and they're leading up to a big crossover between the Eternals, the Avengers, and the X-Men. So it's going to be a crazy thing going on. So, but anyway, any last words on Doctor Strange or Spider-Man you guys want to say?
I liked Doctor Strange more than Spider-Man, but I think that was because I understood it more. And also, I
Right.
think that the Doctor Strange movie for me was like more up my alley.
Right.
I think Spider-Man was just, like I said, too much about the people and the characters.
I think it finished off Tom Holland's story like very well. Like if we don't get another Tom Holland Spider-Man, I would miss it for sure because I enjoy his take on the character. But if that was the end for it, I'd be okay with that.
I like things where
It was a good
where
arc.
the story, where people. Hold on, I had it in my head. It was either the people push the story or the story push the people. But I think it's one of them.
Right.
I don't know
It's
which one.
one of those things.
I one of them makes more sense, but yeah.
No, I got you.
Well, inherently a story that the characters.
I think
drive
character-driven
the
stories are always better.
A character-driven plot will always be more interesting than
Yeah.
a plot that occurs onto a character.
You're right.
That's what I.
That is
that's
a
what
that
I
is
felt
a
like.
whole
yeah,
discussion
Yeah.
for another time regarding some Star Wars films that people don't necessarily like.
All right, yeah, we're not going to get into Star Wars right now, but yeah. So, no, I agree with it. I think overall, I
They
think I
serve
like.
as a great example.
I think Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is probably the better movie over Spider-Man No Way Home in a lot of ways, just because you can take it as a part of part of the bigger MCU, but it's just a fun movie on its own without having to be completely dependent on what came before. And so I agree with you on that one. So, all right, guys. Well, this was a fun conversation, and we will come back to do another one another time. We are actually looking at doing an episode involving Everything Everywhere All at Once by the Daniels and their previous movie, Swiss Army Man. Katrina and I still need to watch that. Harrison watched that today, and
fantastic film. Swiss Army Man and Everything Everywhere All at Once are both fantastic films.
Yes, and so,
weird, but fantastic.
No, I fully enjoyed Everything Everywhere
Emotional
All at Once, and I definitely want to talk about that.
Way.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that one. So, and I definitely want to watch Swiss Army Man. And once we've all watched that and gotten that done, we will record an episode talking about both of those movies and everything. And so look forward to that coming up in the future. Not sure exactly when, but hopefully sooner rather than later. And but until then, stay creepy.
Things just got out of hand.